We are here. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm really excited about the conversation that we're going to have today on healing trauma, addressing emotional health and how that impacts physical health and wellness, and what you can do to start to kind of reprogram, rewire your mind for healing. And I'm joined today by Cher Anderton, and we actually met a couple months ago at a mastermind event in San Diego, and hit it off, and had fun hanging out that weekend. And she has a wealth of information in this field. She's a trauma-informed practices consultant for schools and other organizations. She's a former school counselor, a parent educator, and mental health therapist. And she has a focus on females and healing from trauma. And her passion really lies in helping adults build social and emotional skills so they can model and teach them to their kids, building the parent toolkit and supporting families in the development of resilience factors. So she's the person to talk to when we're looking at this specific topic. Cher's actually lived in every U.S. time zone, which is pretty amazing, and is now settled in Seattle, where she and her partner are raising 4 teens. So that in and of itself is a handful. So thank you, Cher, for being here.
You're welcome. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes. We're glad to have you. Before we dive in, what's the favorite place you've lived?
It's got to be Seattle for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I certainly miss the East Coast, but I like the pace here. I like the weather, actually.
Really? Rain and all, huh?
I hate it. Yeah, I thought I would hate it, but it's super green. Whereas in the winters, I'm used to gray sky, gray trees, gray snow.
Yeah.
So I'll take Seattle green anytime. Yeah.
Yes, the green makes a difference for sure. It's kind of gray and raining today in Dallas, which is not my favorite, but
I'm a convert to Seattle for sure.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I always hear great things about Seattle. I've never been, so I'm gonna have to come visit you.
For sure.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about your story. What got you into this line of work? Just, tell us a little bit about you.
Okay. So what got me into this particular line of work is actually one of my kiddos. So we adopted a boy from foster care when he was almost 8. And previously I'd been kind of staying home with kids. I had an undergrad degree in history, wasn't using it, staying home with the kids. And then when we adopted our son, I was introduced to the world of social work and I fell in love. So I thought I would go to school and become a therapist, because it was really hard to find a therapist who could understand adoption and trauma in this area. And so that was kind of my goal. And then throughout grad school, I fell into school work, was a social worker in a school, and then became a counselor in an elementary school, and really enjoyed that because I felt like I could reach a lot of kids that way, because I love teaching kids social and emotional skills. It's one of my favorite things. And then all the while I was working full-time as a school counselor, I was building my private practice, my private therapy practice, where I see females only. It's kind of my niche, and do mostly trauma work, but I do see a lot of teens with anxiety and depression and kind of a breadth of things, but it's focused on trauma mostly. So that's how I came into this work. But I had my own kind of personal stuff with that too.
Yeah. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So kind of starting back when I was pretty young, when I was about 6 years old, my appendix ruptured. And the doctor kept saying that I had the flu. And so it got pretty bad where I was almost not alive anymore. And was rushed to the hospital at one point and was there for several months just trying to get all of the infection out. And from then on kind of had a lot of health problems that were residual from that.
Mm-hmm.
Just a lot of gut issues. And we know that gut issues can turn into mental health issues. And there's that, throughout my adolescence that were hard. And then I was diagnosed with endometriosis when I was 18. And that I'd been suffering from for about 7 years at that point. And so
you didn't know that's what it was for 7 years?
No. I mean, thinking back, that was, so my appendix was early 80s.
Yeah.
Endometriosis was in the, late 80s, early 90s. So it was just a time when we really did not know a whole lot about all. We've really been lucky in the last, I'd say even just decade, with how much information we have about autoimmune disease and gut health, that sort of thing. So it was kind of just in the dark about a lot of things. Never changed any lifestyle stuff. It was just all kind of treating symptoms at that point. Yeah. And then, so I had surgeries for the endometriosis. Eventually I ended up, after having kids and dealing with fertility struggles and that sort of thing, having a hysterectomy because it was just getting so bad. And then a while ago, about, I don't know, 7 or 8 years maybe, I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's as well. So it was kind of just this piling on of diagnoses well into my 30s that just felt pretty overwhelming. I hadn't really tried anything other than treating the symptoms. So like I said, I was just popping ibuprofen all the time for the endometriosis. I was pretty ill every day of the month, not just during my periods. So it was pretty tough. And so then I feel like I kind of ruined my gut with the ibuprofen and, just kind of abusing the NSAIDs, just trying to not be in pain. So things have shifted with my, with how I manage those things now, for sure.
So where are you now? I mean, do you feel like you're in a really good space, health-wise?
I do. I think for a long time, when I first, especially, I think the Hashimoto's was the thing that really shifted. I think it was a culmination of, there's the internet. I could find out more. Actually, Sean's thyroid sessions was the thing that, I think I might have Hashimoto's. A friend said. And just kind of diving into that world, that was my first introduction to lifestyle changes, changing what I put in my mouth, how I thought about my body was a big deal, because over the years it became a kind of a self-loathing, I would say, just because my body, I felt like it was just always failing me. That was my story, right? This is just going to be my thing in life, that I'm going to have health problems because I just kept getting thing after thing, right? And I wasn't realizing that so much of that was happening because of the stories in my head. And so for a while after I discovered the Hashimoto's, I did a lot of lifestyle changes. So reduced stress, went gluten and dairy free, mostly. Sometimes I have dairy. I'm for sure gluten free, because that is just not a good thing. If I get gluten, I call it's bad news. Definitely can tell almost immediately. And so I've done those kind of changes. So I did the body stuff for a while. And then I discovered, the mind stuff, I've got to fix my stories. That was kind of when I was going through grad school and discovering, I have all these narratives and I can actually change them. I didn't realize that I could. And so then I did the mind thing. And then now where I'm at, I feel like I've combined the two, where I've been working on kind of manifesting health, like using my mind to manifest health. But when you're manifesting something, you're doing, you're being, you're doing, you're having, right? And so I've combined the point where I'm taking really good care of my body, but not really strict like I used to. I used to be pretty hard on myself, working out really hard, watching every calorie that's in my mouth. And now I work on getting 10,000 steps a day. I'm pretty mindful about what I eat, just because I know what I like, but my hand is in the chocolate chip bag here and there. And I have a few, treats that I like, but it feels just like something that's very sustainable. And I feel like it just matches with where my brain is at this point. So I've made that connection for the first time. And it's probably happened really just in the last 6 months or so. So pretty recently.
Yeah. I love that. I absolutely love that. And I can totally relate. I feel like we're very much on a similar path in that regard. You know, from the time I became a health coach, trying to ultimately solve my own stuff, gut related, because I wasn't getting answers through the conventional avenue.
Mm-hmm.
But for years, I focused on nutrition and having the perfect diet, right? And
Right.
not allowing myself things that I wanted, or not even allowing myself to go out to dinner with friends
Right.
because I was afraid to eat the food at that restaurant. And that was so incredibly unhealthy, and I found myself getting worse. And I finally realized that, one, I wasn't addressing the stress piece, and two, I wasn't addressing the stories I was telling myself, and the mindset piece, and the, you know, the thoughts and the beliefs that I had about myself, and this, you know, these symptoms, and
Mm-hmm.
all the things. And it was very negative. I was in a very negative place, and
Yeah.
it's still something I have to work on daily.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, but I'd love to dive deeper into that, because I think there's a lot of people that can relate, especially if someone is dealing with a chronic condition,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's autoimmune or digestive issues, or you know, anxiety and depression, whatever it might be. um, and and you're taking action to heal, right? You're seeing whatever types of doctors you're seeing and doing the things that they tell you to do. And I think it's oftentimes when you feel like you're doing everything right, and you get disappointed when it's not working. And then you get in a very negative space. And um, so I'd like to talk about, one, like, what are steps that we can take to come out of that and kind of shift our thoughts. But two,
Mm-hmm.
before we dive into that, I'd like to really talk about what actually constitutes trauma, because I think so many of us think like big trauma, you know, like, you know, a war veteran, or someone that was raped or abuse or whatever. And those are absolutely terrible, for sure. But I find that there's also little traumas
Yeah.
that need to be addressed as well. You know, even something like, you know, having your appendix rupture as a
Mhm.
child, and then spending so much time in the hospital, or having endometriosis for 7 years, and, you know, those types of things. So can you speak to like what constitutes trauma?
Yeah, so a trauma is not simply, it's complex, but it's an experience or an event that we don't have the psychological capacity to handle. And trauma is relative, meaning something that could be traumatic to you, Jen, would not be to me, and vice versa. It really just depends on our unique nervous systems, and everybody has a unique nervous system. So if our nervous system doesn't have the capacity to navigate whatever we're experiencing, then it's not going to be processed in a healthy way by our brain. Our brain is quite fantastic that way, where it can process a lot of things and kind of navigate it pretty well. But there are some things that the brain just is not capable of processing in a healthy way. And so um, it's it's definitely unique to people, and if it feels big to you, or if it's impacting your nervous system, then that could be considered a trauma for sure. And there's toxic stress and all kinds of things that kind of, there's like a Venn diagram, right, of things, and they all kind of overlap in some way. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
definitely the medical trauma of just I think a lot of people will go through with these, unknown things, like you're saying, you're navigating, you're eating all the things, which I think when you dive down that road, at least it was for me, and I've seen that happen with people, where it kind of becomes its own version of disordered eating,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
to stop, being social because you can't eat the food at the plate, that sort of thing, where you just start really restricting yourself. And um, but I think a lot of us have been seeing doctor after doctor trying to figure out what in the world is going on with our bodies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that can be a really stressful and potentially traumatic experience, to be going to doctor and being told that this is all in your head,
Mm-hmm.
which there is something to be said for that.
Yeah.
But it's a real thing to have something going on in your head. We know that our brain talks to our body and vice versa. And so it's actually a real thing. It just often gets dismissed by conventional medicine. So,
yeah, I totally agree. And yeah, I mean, I feel like, at least in my experience, when I went the conventional medicine route, I was told that everything's fine. There's nothing wrong with you. It's all in your head. And that wasn't helpful for me because I knew that I was not feeling the way I should be feeling. And as big of a fan as I am with functional medicine, I also found that to be sometimes the other extreme, where you go in for one thing, they do all these tests, and you find you have this whole list of things wrong with you, and you're like, that's almost worse, And so it's like, where's the happy medium, and where, like, I feel like the missing piece a lot of times is addressing the mind, and really starting to heal the mind and the heart, in an effort to heal the physical body. And so can you speak a little bit to the subconscious mind, and how that plays a role in health and disease?
Sure. So like I said, we have a unique nervous system, and our nervous systems get wired. So our brains get wired to kind of have us move through life in a certain way, from very early on. So things like genetics, modeling, trauma, socialization, and environment all play a factor in kind of building this wiring in our brains and in our bodies. And some of that wiring can be really helpful, and then some of the wiring can also be less helpful. So if we're being raised by unskilled adults, then potentially our wiring is less and less helpful. I think especially for females, and I definitely know that males and non-binary folks experience this as well, but it's really heavily focused on females to be socialized to feel a certain way about their bodies. And what I think happens with a lot of our wiring is, over time, we create this real disconnect between our mind and our bodies. Like I said, I had that kind of self-loathing, right? I was not in tune with what was going on with my body at all. I had no inner voice, no intuition, no connection. And that wiring is our subconscious mind. We can bring some of it to our consciousness, of course. We can become aware of the stories that are happening, and that's really the first step to healing any of that wiring, to rewiring your brain. You can't change what you don't know is there, right?
Yeah.
So you've got to have some awareness and bring what's subconscious to your consciousness, in order to shift it and create stories that you choose, that you prefer. But it's a real tricky, that subconscious mind. I mean, it has a real great purpose. It's meant to keep us psychologically and physically safe. But again, it can be wired in a way that's just a lot less helpful than we'd like, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And so often, like, we don't, like you said, we don't even realize what we're thinking in our subconscious mind, because it's just on this like autoplay all the time. It's probably been going on for years. It's ingrained in us. Yeah. And so we may be consciously thinking, like, I want to heal. I want to, I want these things in my life. We're consciously saying that, but our subconscious mind is still on this old tape, old loop, and not receiving the same message, right?
Yeah.
And ultimately, the subconscious mind is what is in control.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, when I say it's how we move through life, it's really how we show up. It's how we interpret our experiences. It's all in that subconscious. And so what I find is that we get invitations, right, to change that wiring. So I look back at my diagnoses, even the discomfort that I felt with the disease and with just kind of the state of my quality of life was an invitation for me. It felt more uncomfortable to stay in that space than than it did to think about, oh, the discomfort I'm going to experience to change it. Because
Mm.
changing your brain wiring is not an easy task. Teeny tiny shifts make a huge difference, and it's certainly doable, but it can be quite uncomfortable at times
Mhm.
to take so much accountability for your current experience.
Yeah, totally.
And
Yeah,
even
it's
if you had trauma and it wasn't your, like you didn't put that trauma on you, obviously. That's not your fault, but it's still your responsibility and accountability as an adult to kind of shift that. And
yeah.
it's a gift too. It really is a gift to be able to do that.
I love it. So, for someone that has not really gone down this path, like what are some of the first steps to, I guess, first bring awareness to
Mhm.
your state of mind, and then start to reframe things?
Yeah. So for sure, the awareness piece. So it can be helpful to write things down if you notice you have certain stories about things. And I would pick kind of broad topics like, what do you think about money? What do you think about weight? What do you think about stress? Just kind of like write down a couple of things of what is the automatic wiring that shows up when you think about money or about your health. And so for me, my automatic was, this is just my lot in life.
Mm.
You know, this is how it is. I've always struggled with weight, that sort of thing. And there are a lot of reasons why I felt like I struggled with weight. Some of them valid, some of them less, just more in my head. But writing them down, and then also recognizing when you're like the feelings that you're having, because feelings are information, like they're meant to be paid attention to, but often we distract and numb and stuff down and ignore the feelings. We need to start kind of experiencing that discomfort of paying attention to the feelings, and noticing when they show up. Is the thought coming first and then the feeling? Do you have the feeling and then the thought matches up to it? That sort of thing. They can kind of be interchangeable. So awareness is key. And then before you can change any wiring, really, you need to have ways to soothe your nervous system.
Mm.
So when we have those loops, those feelings come up that are uncomfortable, in order to kind of move forward, your nervous system has to be in a state of reception. It can't be all stressed out. You're not going to have that kind of mental space to conjure up your new story if you're all in your feelings, right? Or really stuck in those loops. And so I have something that I recommend. It's called a feel-good plan, or you can call it a bliss list or whatever it is, but it's a list of things you can think, say, or do to soothe your nervous system. And it seems kind of, like super simple or cliche to have a list of things. But when you think about it, we were taught as kids how to read, how to tie our shoes, how to swim, how to ride a bike, and these step-by-step processes. But so many of us, and I'll ask huge rooms of people this question, how many of you were taught healthy ways, like the steps for healthy emotional processing? And like nobody, or maybe one hand in a room of 70 people, goes up. And so it's really just the step-by-step process, having awareness around what you're feeling and thinking, and then soothing your nervous system, like, okay, I've got this. And the two things that help that the most are the deep breaths.
Mm-hmm.
So just kind of pausing when you notice. That deep breath helps you just pause. And then helpful self-talk. So that's where you're going to kind of make sure you're not making a mountain out of molehill with the things that you're saying to yourself. And so anything could be on a bliss list or a feel-good plan. Like, what are some of the things that you think, say, or do when you're in your feelings?
So lately, yeah. So lately I've been saying, my body is working for me.
Mm-hmm.
I love my body.
Mm-hmm.
I am healthy, happy, and energized.
Mm-hmm.
I am perfect health. I am healed. I am whole. I'm
Yeah.
abundant. I'm successful. Like, the affirmations really help, but also learning how to visualize that at the same time.
Yeah.
So I can start to believe it, right? So,
Yeah. And match it with an emotion.
yeah.
So if you were abundant, right? If you're abundant and healthy and love your body, like, what kinds of emotions do you have when you think those things, and you match them up with the thought?
Yeah.
That's when the magic really happens. And that was a missing piece for me for a long time. It's like I'm saying the affirmations and I'm over and over again. And I know that we know that language wires our brain, right? So giving your brain clear instructions is really helpful. But I think the magic is in the emotion.
I totally agree.
Yeah. So when
Like,
I say my
yeah.
affirmations, it's, I like, I'll do it in a place where I don't look crazy because I'm like smiling and just
Yeah.
like sometimes do a little happy dance,
Hmm.
when I'm saying them because that's the emotions I have when I say I'm healthy and I'm abundant, right? I have a big smile on my face and I feel lighter. And so I
Yes.
match that up, and that's a huge, that was a missing piece for a long time, like I said.
I totally agree. Having the emotional component. What I think it's Joe Dispenza that says thoughts are the language of the brain and feelings are the language of the body. And so
Yeah.
you literally have to feel what you're saying. And you can say affirmations all day long, but if you're in a pissed off state,
Right.
it's not
Your
gonna
body's
work.
not getting the message for sure. And we feel
Yeah.
feelings in our body. They happen in our brain, but I can ask clients and check in with myself and like, where do I feel these feelings in my body?
Hmm.
These feelings in your body, right? And it's like, oh my gut,
Yeah.
my chest is tight. People feel fidgety with their hands, if they're uncomfortable feelings. When
Hmm.
you have the feelings of abundance and health, you just feel like you can kind of lift off, right? You have these
Yeah.
other emotions, and those are felt in your body.
Yeah, for sure. And that actually leads me to another question I had because I was listening to this summit yesterday. Someone speaking on finding joy in the healing journey, which I thought was wonderful. And she was asked the question, can you fully heal without joy? What's
Oh.
your thought to that?
Hmm. I would say no.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think, at least just with personal experience and then seeing and working with clients, I don't feel like, unless you have the component, because I feel like a big piece of this is that, of joy, it kind of goes along with hope for me,
Hmm.
right? You can kind of match those together, but you have to have an expanded view of possibility, right? So you have to kind of have an idea where you're going to feel like you have a picture in your mind of where you're going and what it looks like, sounds like to be healed. And that in and of itself, that visualization along the way conjures up that joy, right? If you're going to match feelings with a picture or a thought in your mind, joy is a big part of that, right? Like you can imagine when I said lighter, that's exactly the feeling I'm
Hmm.
describing, right?
Yeah.
Just feeling that joy of being in my own skin, which I've had really never experienced
Hmm.
until recently. And I remember the point where I experienced it. I was saying my affirmations in my car, and it was the first time that I really felt like the emotion and the thought clicked. And it was joy, and it was really overwhelming. Like I had a really emotional response to it.
Yeah.
And I think you have to have that along the way. Otherwise, it's just kind of this disjointed journey. It's like I'm doing all the physical things, I'm working on my mind, but where's that connection to
Mhm.
really make it click? And I think it's in those feelings,
Yeah.
in the joy of
Yeah.
acting as if, right, that you're there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I love it. I totally agree. Um, so what are some things, so you mentioned like having the bliss list, which I think is a wonderful idea. We talked a little bit about affirmations, deep breathing for sure. I personally have found breath work to be
Yes.
incredible,
Yes.
and an absolutely amazing tool. I use a special form of therapeutic breath work. I've been doing it every morning. And I get so much from it. What are some other things that can help? I know there's like EFT, talk therapy, meditation. Like, what are some other things that are worth trying to see what works for each individual?
Yeah, there's so many things out there. So essentially, each of us has to discover our own like formula, right, for feeling good and to healing. And there are so many modalities, which is great. One of my best friends is a breathwork practitioner, and she does online breathwork sessions. She's phenomenal. So, and I've had some clients also take her classes, and it's been really powerful along the work that, you know, we're doing as well. So I think depending on your experience, therapy can be a huge part of that, but finding the right therapist can be tricky. You don't want to just go to someone who's just going to sit and listen to you talk. You need someone who's going to really kind of challenge your thoughts and behaviors and that sort of thing, and kind of redirect and teach you the skills to rewire your brain. So therapy can be helpful. I do EMDR. So if it's trauma related, then EMDR grabs at that subconscious mind and can be really helpful too.
Can you speak a little to that? What is EMDR?
So EMDR is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So it's essentially the theory behind it. We know a lot about the brain, and we know that it really, really works, but the how is still kind of theoretical. And so potentially when we're in REM sleep, our brain and our eyes are moving back and forth pretty rapidly. That's when our brain processes trauma. And so when we're trying to heal from trauma, having our eyes move corner to corner while we're thinking of images, or that could be trauma related or not, but you're going to kind of, the idea is to grab at that trauma and kind of put it in nicely and neatly in the file cabinet of your brain. So reprocessing it to be less emotionally charged for you. So taking away, kind of fading the memory if it's a really traumatic memory, that sort of thing. So it's a fantastic modality. There's a lot of research out there that you can kind of dive into if you feel like that would be really helpful for you. I think quieting your mind is helpful. So any way that you can do that, because like I said, so many of us are disconnected from our bodies and our mind. Like we're just moving through life, and we're just keeping busy all the time so that we don't have to pay attention to our inner world. And so we've got to really practice, and for some of us, it's really difficult to go internally.
Yeah.
It's so uncomfortable that you have to start real small with kind of, 30 seconds even potentially, and with eyes open and moving, instead of, 20 minutes with your eyes closed and you're just sitting there, and internally you're just in such chaos because that's the state of your internal world. So starting really meeting yourself where you are when it comes to quieting your mind is really helpful. So meditation, yoga is huge. Yoga is really soothing to the nervous system and can be a great modality to connect your mind and your body. Finding a trauma-informed yoga practitioner, which there are a lot of them out there, who can help you kind of drop back into your body and make that connection, is really helpful. I just find movement in general. So finding something that you love that connects you to your body. For me, it's walking, yoga. So
love it.
Any way that you can kind of drop into your body can be really helpful. Breath work. I think really being careful about what you put in your mouth, not disordered in what you're putting to your mouth. I did the AIP, the autoimmune protocol, for years and years, and to a certain extent it helped, but then it just became, like I said, too much of a mind thing,
Yeah, for sure. It's pretty restrictive.
Yeah. And so I kind of do my own version of that at this point.
Right.
And I think what I've seen the most is that, I have a lot of inflammation. I've had a lot of inflammation in my body where it just feels puffy and tight. And no matter how I move my body or what I put in my mouth, I could just not lose weight. I just kept getting puffier and puffier. And then when I did this kind of click, put the emotion with a thought, really did the be, do, have, I've started losing weight. And so with Hashimoto's, that's like a crazy thing to be able to lose weight. And I've lost, 2/3 of what I'm hoping to lose. So just nice and slow and easy. My body feels so good. I love it. So I think really focusing on what's going on in your brain and then trying some of these other modalities to drop into your body is a big piece of it.
Yeah. Awesome. That's such a great message, because food is important, but it's not the end all be all. And it's easy to get carried away with that piece. And so, yeah, at some point you have to address the mind piece, the emotional piece.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always fun. It's not easy, but it's absolutely necessary.
Super worth it.
I feel, and you're worth it. That's
Yeah.
like one of the biggest things is realizing that you are worth it. You're worth the time, and you're worth the investment in that.
And not just you, but the people that benefit from you
Yeah,
being more whole and healed.
so
So
true.
everybody that you interact with gets to reap those benefits, and it really transforms relationships when you can be a whole person showing up, in a relationship, really having a mastering your thoughts and your feelings, and then modeling and teaching that to, if you have kids, it's phenomenal. If you're partnered, if friendships, whatever it is, it transforms relationships when you work on mastering, because it's a lifelong thing. This whole thing is lifelong. Like you said, you and I have probably been working on this for a long time, and I still have to catch myself.
Mm-hmm.
Yesterday I was feeling really uncomfortable, and I'm like, what's going on? And I immediately, my head started like, well, it's probably because of this and because of this. And I started, and then I just, okay, it's all right. I can feel uncomfortable and still be okay. So I just kind of took some walks around the block, just checked in with myself, just really tried to soothe my nervous system, and it just moved through.
Yeah.
So it's a practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's such a good example of like you said, you tuned into your thoughts.
Yeah.
You counteracted it with truth. It's
Mm-hmm.
okay. This will pass.
Yep.
And
Yep.
then you did something to calm your nervous system.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that's such a great practice to implement. So
It's all you need. And
yeah.
other times, once the feeling is still, there's still something there to pay attention to, that's fine too.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can problem solve when you're not all in your feelings. It's easier.
Exactly. Exactly. Do you have any books that you love and recommend to people?
Yeah, if you're going to go, like if trauma has been your experience, I think The Body Keeps the Score. It's a
Yeah.
pretty lengthy tome, but
I,
it take a
yeah.
while to get through. And a lot of the research is focused on PTSD. So that's where a lot of the research has come from studying veterans. But it's just such great kind of psychoeducation of how the brain and the body get wired. And it can just help you kind of, if trauma's been your experience, to step back and be like, oh, okay, it's not me, it's my experiences. And now, and then the last part of the book is kind of shifting your, making changes and trying different modalities to help. Yeah. So The Body Keeps the Score is fantastic. I mean, I am a avid reader, but I do snippets here. My stack, my nightstand is tall. So I'm trying to like click through the books that I find really helpful. I think anything Brene Brown helps just understand emotions.
Yeah.
And to feel, create kind of that safety around feeling these emotions that can be really painful, like vulnerability and shame. So her latest book, Dare to Lead, is like, I recommend it to everybody. It's phenomenal. And then really because of the snippets of time that I have with managing work and family, I mean, I'll always give a shout out to Sean's podcast. And
Sean Croxton.
So Sean Croxton's Quote of the Day podcast, sometimes that's just getting these little snippets of inspirational stuff to expand my idea of possibility, right?
Yeah.
It's huge. And then he recommends a lot of books on rewiring your brain. So I think he probably has some phenomenal recommendations.
Yeah, for sure.
Some of your favorites that you like?
Yeah, so I love all things Brene Brown. I have read part of The Body Keeps the Score. I have not made my way through it. I've read all things Joe Dispenza. I love him. I feel like he puts everything in an easy to understand format, but brings in a ton of science into it at the same time, which I love. And he's got great meditations to go along with his work. And I just finished the book. This is an old book called The Power of the Subconscious Mind. And it's so good. It's so good. And I feel like so many of the more current authors, like,
use that word
from that book, because I'm like, I recognize all this stuff. And so I think the author's name is Joseph Murray.
Okay.
I think, but yeah, it's a great book too. And so those are a few of my favorites. Bruce Lipton's Biology of Belief is another good one. Molecules of Emotion by Candace Pert.
Yeah.
All of those are really good, but they give you kind of like the understanding of it all and the science to it, but then some helpful tools that are worth, trying to implement. But I also feel that working with a therapist is a wonderful, wonderful option. And so I'd love to know what for you to share how people can get in touch with you. And do you work with people remotely?
So I can if it's in a coaching capacity. I can't do therapy online. So just because of HIPAA laws and state, we're hoping, I mean, every therapist hopes that someday they'll federalize this, the licensure and so that you can do that, because telemental health is huge and it creates a lot of accessibility for people who are potentially homebound or don't have childcare or that sort of thing. So really hoping that changes, but I can do like a coaching capacity. Although right now I'm quite full. I have some courses that I'm launching in January about how to rewire your brain, and then one on parenting. So that might be a better route if you can kind of keep an eye on me on social media. So Facebook and Instagram, then you'll know when those things are launching and kind of grab at those.
Okay.
So the one-on-one capacity is quite full right now, but the group capacity will shift in January. Yeah.
That's awesome. And everyone can find you on social just by searching Cher Anderton.
Yeah. So on Facebook, Cher Anderton, and then Instagram is Cher_Anderton, and it's spelled Cher like the singer, and it's
awesome.
T-O-N. So yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, this has been such great information. Is there anything else you want to share? Anything you want to leave us with?
No, I think it was a great conversation. I loved it. Yeah.
Yeah, so good.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for taking your time today. I mean, this is such an important topic, and I think this is going to benefit a lot of people that watch this. So thank you again, Cher.
Of course.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye. See ya.